Hello, and welcome to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Services Rochester Area Podcast. My name is Jan Heineman, and today I'll be reading to you from the Rochester Beacon. Our first story from the Rochester Beacon is dated July 17th and comes from writer Brody Martin. RIT professor explores gendered aging in museum debut. Andrea Parlatto's exhibition, Time to Kill, at the George Eastman Museum is a special occasion. The installation is her museum debut. An assistant professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, Parlatto has published 3 books of her photographs, each bound by dense and sometimes heavy themes like motherhood, the subjectivity of perspective, and suicide. Time to Kill, the exhibition, follows this trend and delves into the idea of gendered aging. Parlatto developed the concept after noticing that as women age, they are subjected to a host of expectations and judgments that their male counterparts don't face. Her intensely personal style of photography seems to be a perfect fit for the subject matter. Parlatto's art features small, deliberate imperfections that ground it in the real world, more than traditional styles of photography and painting. Parlatto finds that details like a small blur within a photo or wrinkles on the subject's face give the work an immediacy. It shows the viewer that they're looking at something completely real, authentic, and personal, rather than something manufactured to fit an ideal of perfection. Another factor informing Parlatto's process is the belief that art's subject matter should be reflected in the work itself. Given that her art touches on deep and often messy subjects, her work is brazen and raw at times, and delicate and subtle at others. Parlatto blends these features to embody the ideas she hopes to highlight. While this artistic philosophy is present throughout Parlatto's work, understanding it is integral to fully grasping the subject matter of her latest venture. As a whole, the Time to Kill exhibition is a meditation on self-perception and self-worth in relation to others' expectations. It has photos, paintings, and sculptures all tied together by narrative letters that convey themes and reflections on them. Interspersed through the abstract journey are photo portraits of older women, which is the central theme of the gallery. They sit casually, as if unaware they're being seen, seemingly freed from the standards imposed so harshly upon them in their lives. This double standard against women is exactly what Parlatto intends to highlight. Women are burdened, as they age, with the impossible task of fighting time and maintaining a perpetually youthful appearance, even into their golden years. Some are admired for their success, and others are gawked at for failing to cling on to days past. It's an unwinnable game that women are forced to play in their lives. It's like a finger trap, she says. The other ways she plays with the ideas of aging and perception include a banana at different stages of rot, disjointed mirrors that reflect bits and pieces of viewers back onto themselves, and a correspondence with a vampire unable to see its reflection. Parlatto uses these different forms of aging to construct a conversation, not only about how women are and aren't allowed to look according to societal norms, but also about how that pressure, when so rigorously judged, impacts their sense of self. Time to Kill is a poignant examination of uniquely female experiences, made accessible by a beautiful collection of multimedia art. It will be on display at the George Eastman Museum until January 3rd, 2027. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Brodie Martin, who's a recent graduate of Nazareth University and a member of the Oasis Project's third cohort. The Oasis Project is the Rochester Beacon's internship program. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Will Cleveland and is dated July 20th. Why Your Beer Costs More Now. Zeb Zimmerman didn't have to guess. He pulled up the bills. Comparing last March, my electric bill was $364. This March, it was $1,049, said Zimmerman, who runs Nine Maidens Brewing at 1344 University Avenue in Rochester on a 2-barrel system. I've been on a warpath trying to save electricity here. If it costs $2,500 a month to have AC, I'm just not going to be able to do it. That single line item, not aluminum, not hops, not anything you'd usually blame for a pricier pint, is what finally pushed Nine Maidens to raise its price $1 last month. It's also a good example of why the question, why does beer cost more, turns out to be a much messier question than it looks. I get some version of that question at almost every tap room I walk into these days. So I asked around 3 local brewers with 3 very different business models and a regional distributor. What I got back wasn't the tidy story I expected, not simply tariffs did it or soaring ingredient costs. Aluminum really is more expensive, but hops might actually be cheaper right now, depending on whom you ask. Utilities have quietly become one of the scariest line items in the industry. And the person setting your local beer prices probably is watching one Brooklyn brewery as closely as they're watching their own spreadsheet. When you ask brewers what actually scares them, few or none respond costs. They say traffic, whether people are showing up. Here's what actually is driving your bar tab, piece by piece, starting with the part that gets all the attention and ending with the part that doesn't get enough. The can, the cardboard, and the 4-pack holder. Packaging is where the national headlines live, and it's real. Roughly 4 out of 5 craft beers sold in the U.S. now come in aluminum cans rather than glass. 78% of packaged volume in 2025, according to the Brewers Association's own annual packaging report, up from 69% just 3 years earlier. And aluminum has been at the center of genuinely chaotic federal trade policy. A 25% Section 232 tariff took effect in February 2025. A June 2025 proclamation doubled it to 50%. And this past April, the framework got restructured again to tax the full value of many aluminum derivative goods rather than just the metal content. Dave Lookenback, co-founder of Mortalis Brewing at 5660 Tech Drive in Avon, is living that number in real time. The cost of cans is crazy, he says. We're almost approaching COVID-level can costs now. During COVID, it was just a scarcity thing. Now, the cost of aluminum is through the roof. He is juggling 3 different can suppliers, just trying to find the best price at any given moment. And it's not only the can itself, Believe it or not, the cost of cardboard has gone up, he says. Even the plastic 4-pack carriers have gotten in on it. He says Pack Tech did a little bit of shrinkflation. They reduced the size of the box. I think you get 30 less in a box for the same price. Mortalis has held its 4-pack price for its heavily fruited sours at $25 since it opened in Avon in August 2018. Luckenbach says it's never gone up, though 3 years ago they started charging sales tax on top rather than absorbing it themselves. We were eating all of it, every tax, he says. We knew we can't keep doing this. We posted about it. We had a good response from that, just being brutally honest. Not every brewery feels the can pinch, though, which is the first sign that packaging can't carry this whole story. Nine Maidens barely touches packaging at all. Zimmerman says, we're such a different model than a lot of people, focused almost entirely on the tap room rather than canning and distribution. And Paul Guaracini, co-founder and brewer at Sager Beer Works at 46 Sager Drive, Rochester, doesn't do much canning either, which turns out to matter a lot for what comes next. The hops price equation. Here's the part that surprised me most. The USDA's National Hop Report shows the U.S. average hop price at $5.38 a pound in 2025, up 26 cents from the year before, even as total acreage fell 7%. That's the top-line national number. But talk to local brewers buying hops right now, and you get the opposite story. The price of hops are actually flat to down, says Guaracini, who's spent nearly 15 years in the industry and works closely with the Brewers Association through various programs and initiatives. Building a hop yard takes years, and that pipeline of hops is still coming out, even as demand is dropping off, he says. We're not using contracts anymore, where we were obligated to buy a certain number of pounds at a locked-in price. Not that many years ago, if you didn't contract Mosaic, a dual-purpose hop cultivated in the U.S., you weren't getting it. Now, it's no problem, and at a good price. Luckenbach's own hop and grain costs have come down the same way, he says, but unlike other local breweries, Mortalis does use hop contracts and typically goes to the Pacific Northwest every year to select the hop lots they want to use in their beers. Guaracini mentions a real cost lever breweries are pulling on themselves. We just started noticing at the beginning of the year or so that there's a shift away from hopped beers, IPAs, toward lighter beers, golden ales, pilsners, lagers, kolchas, he says. That's very significant. That's my, Jam Hazy IPA was our number one seller for years. Now, our Two Paisans Pils is the top seller, and our Kolch is doing really well too. The upshot, cost-wise, those beers have a smaller hop load to them, so they're cheaper to make. Generally, if I step back, our costs of production aren't going up. They're holding in there, and that's good. Add in that Sager doesn't do much canning, and Guaracini's picture of direct ingredient costs is genuinely upbeat. We're doing better than some others, Guaracini says. We actually feel pretty good about the direct costs. But where the real squeeze is hiding, utilities. If ingredients are a mixed bag, the fixed cost side of the ledger is where brewers I talked to sounded most alarmed. and it's the part readers probably think about least. Zimmerman's electric bill jump is what finally pushed Nine Maidens to raise pint prices from $7 to $8 last month, 7 years after opening at $6. Even at $7, our regulars were telling us we could raise it, he says. Everybody else is charging $8, $9, or $10. It's not like I was getting extra traffic maintaining the $7 price. Guaracini describes the same pattern from a different angle. Our utility bill is 50% higher than it was maybe 3 years ago, he says. It's insane. Beyond that, he points to something rarely discussed in beer pricing conversations at all, the cost of running a small business generally. Professional services, technical services, trades, having your taxes done, a kitchen hood inspection, a fire alarm inspection, plumbing repairs, Guaracini says, anything with a skilled component, those prices are way higher than inflation. It feels like death by 1,000 cuts. And because we're small, we're paying the same for an inspection as anyone else, even a place twice our size. Sager's own pint price reflects the restraint that runs through everyone I talk to. $6 when they opened in 2018, $7.50 on average now. Where costs have exceeded inflation, we're eating them, Guaracini says. I think it's a value luxury. We just cannot ask that much more for a pint. The distribution tier and the other half effect. I also put the question directly to a distributor who covers the Western New York market, who agreed to talk on the condition that neither he nor his company be named, given how sensitive pricing conversations are with the breweries he works with and competitors. His account lines up with what the brewers described. Distributors, he says, aren't the ones initiating price increases. Roughly 90% of the time, a price increase starts with a brewery coming to him squeezed by can tariffs or a hop supplier switch, not with the distributor deciding it wants a bigger cut. His margin runs around 30% across most of craft and stays there. When brewery costs rise, distributors pass along modest, specific increases, $5 a half barrel, $2 on sixtels, rather than padding their own take. Then there's the part of the answer I didn't expect from him. A single brewery's success reshaping what the whole market thinks a fair price looks like. Call it the other half effect. The Brooklyn Hazy IPA Heavyweight, which moved into our market in 2018 and now has 2 satellite tap rooms in the region, Canandaigua and Bloomfield, was the first brewery here to charge $20 or more for a 4-pack of 16-ounce cans. The distributor says, ever since Other Half, that's the brewery in Brooklyn, there's an expectation to what people are willing to pay has gone through the roof. I don't think we'd be selling any cases for $80 if it weren't for the Other Half being able to get $20 a 4-pack. There's an image, and you have to fall in line with cases being sold to Wegmans for $90 or $100. In other words, some of what's pushing packaged beer prices up isn't a cost input at all. It's a ceiling one buzzy Brooklyn brewery redrew, and everyone nearby now prices against it. What actually worries most? If there's one thing that came up with almost everyone, unprompted, it's that ingredient and tariff costs aren't actually the top concern. Traffic is. Guaracini says, we can bitch and moan about an increase of 5 cents a pound for something, but if people don't show up, having a great margin doesn't mean anything. My concern is the overall malaise, inflation, things going on that are keeping people at home and not coming out. We're doing everything we can to bring people in, food, events, non-alcoholic drinks. We're actually doing fairly well on cocktails. Cocktails are up, but beer is down. That anecdotal worry lines up with the industry-wide numbers. The Brewers Association's 2025 year-end report shows total craft production down 4% for the year, with retail dollar value off 2.8% to $28 billion nationally, and 60% of breweries surveyed reporting production declines. A meaningful minority, about 39%, still grew, which tells you this isn't a uniform collapse, so much as a market sorting winners from everyone else. Not everything is grim math, though. Nine Maidens keeps its 32-ounce Crowler fills at $12 by buying in bulk through a small informal co-op with Swiftwater Brewing. A handful of local brewers pooling purchasing power instead of competing over it. And what it means for drinkers. So, is your beer more expensive because of tariffs? Partly, if it comes in a can. Because of hops? Actually, maybe less than you think for some breweries. Because distributors are squeezing margins? Not according to the distributor I talked to. If anything, brewery price increases are what's pulling distributor invoices up. Because of a Brooklyn brewery that made $20 4-packs feel normal. Genuinely, yes, at least a little, if you're buying cans. Because your neighborhood taproom's electric bill nearly tripled? For at least two of the breweries I talked to, that's the number that finally moved the needle. And because fewer people are walking through the door in the first place, that's the one that worries brewers most of all, more than any single ingredient or tariff line ever could. What ties it all together is restraint. Every brewer I spoke with described eating costs rather than passing them fully along. Mortalis holding its 4-pack price for going on 8 years, Sager raising a pint by $1.50 over the same stretch, Nine Maidens holding at $6 or $7 for 7 years before finally, reluctantly, going to $8. If you want to know where your money goes furthest, it's still the taproom pour. No distributor tier, no case pricing arms race with a brand 3 states away, just the brewery and you. As Guaracini puts it, it's not just the product, it's the experience. If you value the camaraderie, the things that you can get in a brew pub that you can't get at home, you get more for the dollar. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from contributing writer Will Cleveland, who is a former Democrat and Chronicle reporter, who writes about beer in the Finger Lakes region and Western New York on Substack. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn and is dated July 20th. Lupine will not seek re-election, endorses Barnhart. Rochester City Council member Mary Lupine, whose term ends at the end of 2027, announced today that she will not seek re-election. Lupine has endorsed her preferred successor, fellow progressive Rachel Barnhart, who currently is a Monroe County legislator. Lupien says, "It has been the honor of my life to serve the people of the East District. Together, we've shown that when we invest in people, we build a safer, healthier, and more compassionate city." Her 2-term tenure on City Council has been defined by pushing for progressive, left-leaning policies that focused on housing, public safety, and health. Lupien says passing good cause eviction protections, codifying Rochester's sanctuary city policy, bringing the Advance Peace Violence Prevention model to the city, and expanding community birth doula training through the Healthy Baby Network were all achievements over her time in office. Those goals sometimes put her at odds with others on City Council. Council member Michael Patterson has been a frequent sparring partner for Lupien. He has called Lupien and other council members a socialist bloc when it comes to their voting histories. Lupien ran as a progressive for mayor last year, pitching herself as an option to the left of incumbent Malik Evans. However, Evans cruised to victory in the primary with 57% of the vote, compared to Lupien's 33%. After the contest, she lamented the extremely low 20% turnout of Democratic voters in the city, and also commented on the over $500,000 spent by the Evans campaign in that race. The Working Families Party declined to endorse a candidate in the race, so her name did not appear on a general election ballot. By endorsing Barnhart to carry on in her stead, Lupien wants progressive continuity for the East District. "I'm proud of what we've accomplished, and I'm confident Rachel Barnhart will continue that work," says Lupien. Rachel has spent years serving our community by asking tough questions, holding county government accountable, and fighting for the people of Rochester. She also praises Barnhart's record on affordable housing, government transparency, and accountability, and says the county legislator has challenged powerful interests when our community deserved better. Barnhart recently spoke out about a Monroe County Sheriff's deputy's presence at the America 250th celebration event in Washington, D.C. "Mary has left an extraordinary mark on Rochester," Barnhart says. "She helped transform how our city responds to mental health crises. She strengthened protections for renters and immigrant families, invested in evidence-based violence prevention, and consistently challenged us to build a city centered on care, dignity, and opportunity. I'm honored to have her support and committed to building on that foundation." While the candidate petitioning for the 2027 elections in Rochester has not begun yet, Barnhart's acceptance of Lupien's endorsement indicates she plans to run for City Council. Elected to 3 terms on the county legislature, Barnhart's current term ends in 2026. She ran unsuccessfully for a range of positions: State Assembly in 2016, Rochester Mayor in 2017, and Congress in 2018, before being elected to the county legislature in 2019. Barnhart's base of voter support has always been strongest in the eastern part of Rochester. Lupien plans to focus on pursuing a degree to become a licensed mental health counselor, a path she embarked on earlier this year. Service isn't tied to a title, Lupien says. It's showing up where you're needed most. The news comes after Alyssa Brennan, Senior Deputy County Attorney for Monroe County, announced her bid for the East District. Brennan released a statement following Lupien's endorsement of Barnhart, contrasting the county legislator's background with her own. Legislator Barnhart, she says, is a long-term political candidate who's run for a wide range of seats. I am a hard-working, first-generation professional and a mother of two who's offering a new generation of leadership grounded in service, collaboration, and accountability. That's from Alyssa Brennan. As an attorney, Brennan believes her experience with both private practice and local government makes her qualified for the position. She also has raised over $10,000 in small donations after launching the campaign. Donors include City Council member Mitch Gruber's PAC, Brighton Town Board members Nate Saltzman and Clara Sanguinetti, a real estate business, Frederico Realty, and retired police department investigator John Brennan. In an announcement email, Barnhart said Rochester's power brokers have already recruited a candidate for the East District. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Jacob Schermerhorn, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer and data journalist. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Audra Fitzgerald and is dated July 21st. Giant Coffee seeks market niche combining taste and function. Finding strong, flavored coffee can be hard, and finding tasty, functional coffee is even harder. That's what Ashland Huckabee thought 2 years ago as he tried to find the perfect cup of coffee. Huckabee realized that he could create a great product for an underserved market by combining the two. On Juneteenth, Huckabee launched Giant Coffee Company, a direct-to-consumer brand that ships flavored beans and grounds nationwide, as well as functional and enhancing add-ins. With colorful packaging, an octopus logo, and fresh ideas, Giant brings a distinct flair to the functional flavored coffee market. As the founder, CEO, and sole employee of the company, Huckabee has a lot on his plate, especially on top of his account manager job at Mediavine, an ad management and technology company. His business is self-funded, and Huckabee manages all of the manufacturing, supply lines, and marketing himself. Huckabee was born in Alabama, but moved to Rochester 2 decades ago. For now, his roaster and fulfillment center are located in Texas. Huckabee says, I do want Giant to have a physical presence in Rochester one day, specifically around our fulfillment and operations, but that was not the practical place to begin, especially with limited capital. Starting online gave me a way to launch, prove the concept, reach customers beyond the city, and grow toward that larger vision. Currently, Giant's sales are online, and the company ships nationwide. Huckabee uses social media as his primary marketing tool for its low cost and accessibility, posting short-form videos and photos of his operations to reach new audiences. Although he started small, he's already found success since the launch. My launch was great, Huckabee says. I had a lot of sales, more than I thought I would have. I had a lot of support from friends and family. So far, Giant has reached customers in 17 states and sold 104 items in total, including 70 bags of coffee. This also includes 27 limited edition launch mugs claimed through an opening promotion that gifts customers a mug with a purchase of $30 or more. Huckabee hopes to turn Giant into a national coffee brand and household name in flavored coffee. Being direct to consumer will remain central to the brand's national expansion from day one. This system encourages customer relationships early on, as well as with email marketing and special offerings to returning customers. Giant currently offers 2 flavors in both ground and whole beans, sourced mostly from the Matagalpa region of Nicaragua. Caramel Theory combines the sweet taste of caramel with pecans, pralines, and cream. Midnight Reserve offers the richness of dark chocolate with the additional flavors of blackberry and raspberry jam. I want Giant to prove that flavored coffee can be bold, intentional, and taken seriously, not just a gimmick, says Huckabee. Initially, Huckabee wanted Giant to be a company focused on selling functional coffee, that is, coffee enhanced with bioactive ingredients to provide specific health benefits. Manufacturing and logistics challenges dashed that idea, so he had to pivot. Instead, Giant sells add-in quick-dissolve powders to maintain the business's functional aspect. Finding the balance between those two things, taste and function, is really how Giant started to propel itself into a major reality, says Huckabee. Neutral in taste and aroma, the add-ins enrich the original product without changing the coffee. The option currently available online, called Flow State, includes L-theanine, an amino acid that works with caffeine to create a calm focus. Selling these add-ins separately from the coffee also give consumers the option to choose whether they want them. Giant's pledge to value taste and flavor sets it apart from coffee brands that focus on function. In addition to selling online, Huckabee hopes to partner with brick-and-mortar shops and cafes across Rochester to sell Giant coffee to local consumers. "I love this place," he says. "It's my home." I've just done a little research and found that the website for the Giant Coffee Company has the address thisisgiant.com. And this story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Audra Fitzgerald, who's a recent graduate of Ithaca College and a member of the Oasis Project's 3rd internship cohort. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Beacon comes from writer Gary Craig and is dated July 22nd. Imprisoned drug dealer wants his family to get most of a $250,000 settlement. This post is one in a partnership between the Rochester Beacon and veteran reporter Gary Craig, featuring articles published on his Substack site. Imprisoned drug trafficker Brandon Washington last year received a $250,000 settlement with an insurance company. The government now wants its share. Washington was alleged to head a marijuana trafficking ring that, in the summer of 2022, was entangled in a violent turf war. That conflict in 2022 led to the fatal shootings of Rochester police officer Anthony Markowitz, local hip-hop artist Richard Collinga, and Mygel Rand. Last year, in one of my first Substack posts, I wrote of Washington's successful efforts to get a settlement with an insurance company after a city home Washington lived in was shot up and set afire. He received $250,000. Washington had earlier indicated that some of the money would go toward neighborhood rehabilitation or to honoring Officer Anthony Mazurkowitz, court records show. But none of these proposals were included in a May letter from Washington to the court about the possible dispersal of the money. Washington, who's serving more than 21 years in prison, instead, quote, wants the entirety of the funds to benefit himself and his family. This from federal prosecutors writing in a court filing this month. Washington has proposed that after payment of taxes and the costs of demolishing his home, much of the remaining money would be distributed among his relatives, including his children. Federal prosecutors are opposing this. Washington is asking that more than $172,000 be provided to his family. Under federal statutes, a court can order payment from indigent individuals represented by taxpayer-paid attorneys if money does become available later. Washington had 2 lawyers for his legal proceedings. He ultimately pleaded guilty to a drug trafficking conspiracy and other crimes. At his sentencing, Washington apologized to Lynn Mazurkowitz, the widow of the slain Rochester police officer. Mazurkowitz was shot by Kelvin Vickers, one of the men entangled in that turf battle. Money for the family. Federal prosecutors have agreed that Washington's insurance settlement can properly be used for the taxes and demolition, but they argue the money designated for Washington's family should instead go to the Criminal Justice Act fund that covers the costs of lawyers for indigent defendants. There is a federal public defender's office, but when there is a conflict or a multi-defendant criminal prosecution, additional attorneys are needed. Prosecutors wrote, "Here, the court should determine that funds are available on behalf of the defendant, who was furnished representation by 2 CJA-appointed attorneys in this case, for which the taxpayers and the CJA fund likely paid a 6-figure dollar amount." That's from the prosecutor's note. Prosecutors go on, if Washington had $250,000 at the time he was appointed counsel, the court would likely have required Washington to utilize some or all of those funds to obtain counsel. That should still be the case, and the court should order an appropriate reimbursement to the CJA fund. This case is before U.S. District Judge Frank Garassi, Jr. This story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Gary Craig, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer. He's a retired Democrat Chronicle reporter who now writes on Substack. And you're listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Our next story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Alafia Praswala and is dated July 22nd. Data center opponents see executive order as partial win. When Governor Kathy Hochul last week signed an executive order establishing the first statewide moratorium on hyperscale data centers, it was both a win and a disappointment for groups in Lansing, near Ithaca, who are fighting against a data center proposal in their community. They had hoped the governor would instead sign legislation placing a 1-year moratorium on most New York data centers above 20 megawatts. In June, over 20,000 people signed a petition urging the Lansing Town Board to reject the development plan for an AI data center on Cayuga Lake. More than 17,000 of the signatures are from New York residents, including some from Rochester, organizers say. The proposal, submitted by Maryland-based tech company TeraWulf, would include the construction of a 300 or 400 megawatt hyperscale AI data center at a retired coal plant on the shoreline of Cayuga Lake, just north of Ithaca. In its initial announcement, the company stated that acquiring land to start this project marked a major step forward in its expansion of high-performance computing and AI data center hosting. Called Lake Hawkeye Data, the project is described by TeraWulf as designed with the community in mind, a modern research and technology hub that, quote, revitalizes a long-standing industrial property and transforms it into a center for advanced digital processing and research innovation. That's from TeraWulf's proposal. Those who support data centers, such as members of labor unions, largely cite job creation as a benefit. However, since the development plans were announced, a number of residents of Lansing and the surrounding areas, including the Rochester region, have banded together to oppose the data center. FLX Strong, one of the groups at the forefront of this opposition, is a community-based movement of residents and various nonprofits that has been providing news and updates, resources, and education to the public. The group has raised a number of environmental, economic, and health concerns. For Gay Nicholson, president of Sustainable Finger Lakes, an environmental nonprofit involved with FLX Strong, one of the main concerns is a data center's impact on an already fragile electrical grid. Nicholson says, the original electricity generation in the state has been fossil fuel-based, especially downstate. 29% of the fossil fuel generating plants are over 50 years old, and 10% of them are over 70 years old. So they're prone to break down. Of course, add in the problem of the storms, the more and more extreme weather taking down lines and putting pressure on the grid or knocking out generation supply. It's all a tricky, complex problem to solve. Hence, do not add any data centers to this already hairy situation. As a member of FLX Strong, Nicholson says, Sustainable Finger Lakes focuses on grid impacts. The organization has a long history of helping low-income families switch to high-efficiency heat pumps for heating and cooling, and teaching about climate and reducing emissions. Nicholson notes that there has already been a 110% increase in electricity delivery rates since 2020, and there is no current plan to address the impact on the grid or the resulting higher electricity prices resulting from the addition of a data center. A New York independent system operator representative was not available to comment in time for this article's publication. The New York independent system operator monitors the reliability of the state's power system and coordinates supply distribution. Other concerns cited by critics are largely environmental. The viral petition posted by No Data Center FLX reads, TeraWulf's proposed plans involve new power transmission line construction through wetlands, which has the potential to change the habitat type for decades, stir up sediments, which endangers aquatic life, and greatly reduce the wetlands' water holding capacity, potentially permanently altering the wetland hydrology, if not outright destroying the wetlands altogether. The petition also mentions noise pollution caused by construction, the admission of harmful pollutants, and TerraWolf's plan to, quote, use up to 700,000 gallons of lake water per day for mist cooling on particularly hot days. FLX Strong is pushing for the town and planning board in Lansing to consider the full environmental and health impacts of TerraWolf's proposal before allowing a permit. Part of this conflict also has to do with Lansing's zoning laws. Last fall, the Lansing Town Board considered a one-year moratorium on large developments, while officials began rewriting the zoning code, but ultimately voted against it at a November 2025 meeting. The Lansing Town Board did not respond to the Beacon's request for comment. FLX Strong partnered with Cayuga Lake Environmental Action Now to file an Article 78 lawsuit against the Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals, TerraWolf, Cayuga Operating Company, LLC, a subsidiary of TerraWolf, Lake Hawkeye, LLC, and Fred Del Favero, the project's manager. Originally, the Lansing Appeals Board had concluded that the proposed TerraWolf data center did not meet the requirements to be considered a scientific research facility, which the company claimed it was, but eventually granted TerraWolf an appeal that classified the data center as a general processing facility. According to the No Data Center FLX website, the Article 78 proceeding seeks to correct fundamental errors of law and violations of lawful procedure by the Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals in adopting an interpretation of the town's zoning ordinances, affirming that their 300-megawatt AI data center could be classified in the legacy use category of general processing. The Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals decision to classify the data center plans under general processing has been taken out of context of the original zoning code. Nicholson says, "It's a stretch," she says. "Anything could be called general processing. We can't pretend a massive data center fits into that." As the petition was being circulated and a lawsuit was filed, FLX Strong and involved groups were also pushing for Hochul to sign the Responsible Data Center Development Act that would have put a one-year moratorium on all New York data centers above 20 megawatts, excluding facilities that are majority owned, operated, or controlled by public research institutions and used for research purposes, or already began construction before the Act's effective date. The bill also contained provisions such as requirements for data centers to fund local benefits, like residential energy upgrades and drinking water, and to host public hearings before getting issued a permit by the Department of Environmental Conservation. The legislation has been approved by the state legislature, but has not yet been signed by Hochul. The executive order, by contrast, places a temporary moratorium on all new hyperscale data centers that require 50 megawatts or more. The purpose of the moratorium is to give the state more time to assess the impact of data centers and to build a regulatory framework. It's currently unclear what effect that executive order will have on the plans for Lake Hawkeye. The executive order does not change our expectations for Lake Hawkeye, which has always been contemplated as a long-term, multi-year development. nor does it affect the local planning and review process currently underway in Lansing, and we look forward to continuing to engage constructively with the Planning Board and other stakeholders as the project advances. That's from TerraWolf's Chief Strategy Officer, Carrie Langlais. Although news of the moratorium was initially exciting, says Alison Desaria of No Data Center FLX, it's an important distinction to make that it's not the bill, it's an executive order. Regarding TerraWolf's plans in Lansing, the advocates are confident the executive order will have an impact. They don't have permits from anyone, says Desario. They don't even have a fully submitted project plan to the planning board. All they have is a zoning appeal approval. She encourages residents to keep showing up to planning board meetings where TerraWolf is presenting to understand what they're thinking. In the meantime, FLX Strong has also been hosting public educational events and is promoting action items for those who oppose the data center and want to get involved. A playlist of environmental educational webinar videos from Sustainable Finger Lakes, including information about data centers and the New York grid, is available on YouTube under Finger Lakes Forecast Webinar Series. That's YouTube, Finger Lakes Forecast Webinar Series. And this story from the Rochester Beacon comes from writer Alafia Presswala, who's a Rochester Beacon contributing writer and a member of the Oasis Project's second internship cohort. And you've been listening to readings from the Rochester Beacon on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Thanks for listening today. My name is Jan Heineman and hope to have you come back and listen again in the future.